Welcome back, guys. I'm Mike Burrows from StanceWorks. This is my 1981 Ferrari 308 GTBi, and we are in the middle of swapping in a turbocharged Honda K24 with the ultimate purpose of building a car we can compete in time attack with, as well as have some fun on the street. And we got a long way to go. We're only just getting started. I spent a lot of time yesterday just staring at this car, trying to figure out how to implement some new structure into it. We need to reinforce everything that we cut out in the last episode, and then we also need new structure to mount the engine to, and that doesn't exist yet. I think I finally got a game plan together. Instead of telling you guys about it, I'm gonna let that unfold on camera. We're gonna start by cutting out the trunk. Let's get to it. First things first is to get this engine pulled out once again. Thankfully, this thing's getting pretty easy to remove solo. Although there's nothing really attached to the engine, I'm pretty glad to see that it comes out in a handful of minutes. Up next is getting underneath the car and beginning to remove some of the metal that holds up the sound insulation. This is held on by a series of rivets and a few tack welds, so here I'm just going after the rivets first. With the rivets out of the way, I dropped the panel, which revealed even more rock wool insulation hiding under this thing. I had to remove a few more rivets to get the panel to drop and pull it out of the way, and once I did that, I gave it a quick weighing, which thankfully is going to save me quite a few more pounds. I put on some gloves and a mask and began to remove the rock wool insulation, initially thinking I was going to keep this panel, but if you peek over to the left, you'll see why that was definitely not the case. So I've found the first actual rust on the car, and I'm glad to say I'm not upset about it at all. It was where people said you will find rust on these cars, underneath the trunk insulation. And I'll turn the camera around and show you guys. Fortunately, it's all on panels that are either riveted in or just bonded in, stuff that I'm happy to remove, stuff that I was probably planning on removing anyway. So really not a problem. It's just on some thin sheet metal. I mean, this would even be an easy repair if you were restoring the car. It's not structural whatsoever. It's just on some of the sheet metal that holds the insulation. So check it out. So we just removed this panel, and now we're looking at the back side of this. And here's where we have our rust. It's on some sheet metal that's just kind of wrapped around. It's riveted on underneath here, so I think this stuff's gonna be pretty easy to remove. I'm sure it just rusted because it had moisture trapped in this rock wool insulation that was here. We've got a bit on both sides. It's not as bad on this side, but overall, we're gonna get this stuff cut out. I don't know how much I'll focus on this today. It's definitely on a to-do list. I'm probably going to drill the rest of the rivets out so we get rid of some of this stuff, because the main objective at the moment is to get to this structure here. We're gonna use this. This is an integral piece of the chassis. It's what kind of stiffens side to side. So I wanna get as much access to that as we can. So let's keep moving. I'm trying to get to that front cross brace so that I can tie into it with structure further on down the road. It's an important piece of metal that traverses the car, and I think it will play a valuable role in creating new bracing for those control arm mounts that we've cut a lot of material away from. Up inside of the car, I got to cutting out that rusty panel, so I ran a cutoff wheel along both sides of it where it was tack welded in place, and in places bonded as well. The good old-fashioned smash it out method didn't quite get the trick done, so I had a bit more cutting to do. It was probably too little too late, but I did want to put a blanket over the back of the car. The most important reason being I didn't want to hear you guys complain about it while I throw sparks all over it. If I haven't said before, I'm pretty sure we're going to be repainting the entire car, and yes, it will be staying yellow, but I'm not hugely worried about some sparks hitting the paint. I got that panel out of the way, and then I moved into the engine bay itself. Here you can see some of the bracing that was originally hidden by another insulation panel. I've got a number of tabs to cut off, and then I want to cut away the sheet metal between these ribs, leaving just the ribs behind. I then hopped to the other side of the panel and continued cutting. So you can see in this clip at the moment that I'm using a small reciprocating air saw, and this is another tool that's quite handy to have in your tool set. They use small reciprocating saw blades that you can use for different materials if you get different tooth counts. They really won't cut through much other than sheet metal. They're not good for anything thick, they're just too slow, and even still, they often get loaded up and don't want to cut through stuff, so they're kind of finicky to use. I've never used one that will just cut through anything like butter. Maybe somebody can suggest one that does. I've had a few of these. I just wanted to share it because it is a unique tool that some of you guys may not have seen, and it's really handy for getting into small, tight spaces, especially for sheet metal or thin metal that you need to cut. Check one of these guys out. It's not the most effective way to do things, but I do tend to rely on fatiguing metal and tack welds pretty often. It helps not having to get all the way into the nooks and crannies with tools if you can just fold metal back and forth to break it. Although in a lot of places, I did have to get the cutoff wheel or the air saw. Getting all 3 panels cut away left a lot of remaining steel that I had to focus on separating. Bits and pieces of the original panel that were either tack welded in place or glued down. I used the finger file to get a lot of this stuff shaved down enough to break it loose. Slowly but surely I was making real progress and eventually got to the point where I was left with just edges and pieces of material that were glued into place. I grabbed a pair of pliers and slowly pulled them off of the underlying tube and material. A lot of the little nooks and crannies were pretty tough to get into, and in some spots I'm gonna have to revisit them with some different tools in the future. This upper flange, which is also tack welded and bonded into place, is one of the last pieces I need to remove before I dive back underneath the car. Don't forget there are still some rusty pieces underneath that we've got to get rid of. I hopped into the engine bay because I did realize there were 2 more panels holding insulation. These were tucked away underneath each quarter panel. These panels were, of course, just a number of more rivets and Rockwell insulation that came out by hand. I hopped under the car to remove those initial rusty pieces that we found in the beginning of the episode. I thought these would be easy to remove and they looked like they were riveted, but it turns out it was a lot of tack welds in a lot of really hard to reach places. I had to rely on fatiguing the metal a lot to get these things freed up. Eventually though, they did come out and of course saved me a couple more pounds, not including the rusty material that was long gone. Welcome back for day 2, guys. I kind of wound up working into the evening yesterday until about dinner time when I called it quits, and I stopped recording at some point because truth be told, I kind of just didn't feel like it. But I didn't really accomplish anything major off camera anyway, just some small stuff. But I figured I would spin the camera around and show you guys where we're at in the trunk so you can get a lay of the land. I know it's been a lot of time lapse and not really much of an up close look at what we're doing and where we stand, so I want you guys to know where we're at. Check it out. So as you guys can see, the trunk is pretty much completely cut out at this point. We've got all of the excess metal removed, and our rust exploration job has honestly gone really well. We have really minimum rust to contend with. We've got a little bit of surface stuff here. This stuff will like grind right off, nothing of consequence. And the chassis otherwise is in great shape. Even where we had the rusty sheet metal before, we've got a little bit of surface stuff here, but all of this will clean up and it looks fantastic. There's no rust hiding underneath anywhere, especially where we had metal on metal, and I was pretty worried about it. There was a lot of insulation kind of stored up under these that held water, and it rusted the bottom. I expected to find some holes in this, and thankfully we did not. Everything looks really good. There's just some cleanup to do. We got lots of kind of, tack weld stuff, remnants, some jagged pieces of metal we got to clean up. But everything's looking really good. And I think the only thing we really have left back here is some cleanup. We have a lot of glue, bonding agents, lots of leftover, I don't even know, kind of undercoating material. It's just a mess. There's still insulation, there's still rubber coating, and I want to get this stuff cleaned up. I know that if I have to sit here and work back here in this and look at it, I'm gonna feel like I've got a crappier project going on than I really do. It's gonna feel like I'm cutting corners even when I'm not. So I think what I'm gonna do now is spend a couple hours just cleaning this stuff up and trying to get to a point of a good base for us to move forward. And with a bit of luck, maybe this afternoon I'll get to starting to bend up some tubes, but otherwise that's what we'll pick up on Thursday. So let's get to it. I used a lot of different tools for this process, including those plastic bristle brushes, sanding discs, and a wire wheel. There was a lot of adhesive, a lot of tack welds, and just general crap stuck to this metal, and so this took some serious time to get rid of. Eventually I did get out the DA to smooth it down and get it looking nice, but it was a lot of work. A lot of this cleanup is probably overkill to be doing right now, but it'll save me a bit of time later down the road because we will have to paint all of this stuff. And as mentioned, I really don't want to be working in a really gross engine bay. That's not to say a lot of it will come off or get all over me, but it's just an unpleasant place to be, and I figured it was responsible to go in and take time now to clean a lot of this stuff up. Eventually, it was the wire brush that proved to be the best tool for a lot of this stuff. It knocked free any remaining insulation, was quick to pull off all of the bonding agent and panel bonding glue that held some of these pieces together, and was really easy to get in a lot of the nooks and crannies. You don't have to have a die grinder for this either. You can put one in the end of a drill or a number of other tools too. You'll notice a quick jump here because, as luck would have it, my camera died and didn't record probably another hour of work and cleanup. But eventually I got to the point of getting out the vacuum cleaner and calling this part done. And that's finished. There's about an hour of footage missing there, but let me show you guys how much better this thing looks. So there's still plenty in the corners we need to do in the future, but we don't have insulation stuck everywhere. There's not tons of adhesive everywhere. Overall, this whole thing is just feeling a lot tidier, a lot better place to work and get some stuff done in. So I'm really happy with all of that. We've still got some insulation to clean off on the back, but again, there's still 40 hours of work to do back here. We'll get to it another time. So we're calling that done. I'm calling this episode done, but I do have to show one pretty cool thing because my neighbor just reached out and said that he's giving me this big ass gantry, big gantry hoist with an electric winch on it. And this is going to be hugely helpful for taking engines in and out and for pulling the cab off of the truck, the 55 Chevy, once we get there. So this thing is awesome. I'm stoked on it, and it's the best price of all. It's free 99. So with that said, we're calling this episode finished. On Thursday, we're diving in, we're actually fabricating, we're bending up some tubes. No more, oh, we got to do this first. That's what's next on the list, and I'm pumped for it. I want to say thank you, as always, to you guys for watching, liking, subscribing. You guys get the gist. I don't need to keep going on. Thank you, as always. I'll catch you on Thursday. I'll see you then.